Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. I think we'd all be hard-pressed to find anyone who hasn't been part of a terrible meeting. I feel like meetings have such a stigma because most meetings could have been an email. Most meetings have no direction, no intention, and no objective. And therefore, they just turn into these time-wasting, soul-sucking things that we have to put up with. I know you agree with me. I've been through some terrible meetings in my life. And I know that when I was in corporate, my entire job was meetings. It was 8 hours of meetings a day, double and triple booked. And there is a cure for it. I'm so excited to share all of the knowledge of my guest today, Mamie Kanfer Stewart. She is passionate about helping people thrive at work. She's the host of the Modern Manager podcast, author of Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings, and founder of Meteor, a training firm focused on productive meetings. In addition, Mamie is an executive coach and trainer and works with entrepreneurs and managers to build the habits that they need in order to manage themselves successfully and their team so that everyone can be the best selves and do their best work. I love that Mamie focuses on productive meetings. This is a skill that we are unfortunately not really taught well in our corporate life, and it can just make or break your team morale and the tone of your whole organization. So there's a ton of stuff in here today that you're going to learn, a lot of tactical help to make your meetings better. Make sure you're taking some notes on how you can improve your meetings, and make sure you're sharing any of your takeaways with us on Instagram at Keep What You Earn. Let's hear from Mamie. Hi, Mamie. Welcome to Keep What You Earn.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Could you just introduce yourself to everyone listening? Say hello.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Mamie Kanfer Stewart. I am the founder of Meteor, a company that focuses on having effective meetings. I wrote a book called Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings. I'm the host of the Modern Manager podcast and do a whole bunch of other stuff too, but that's enough for now.
Totally. And I love this topic because, if there's like one meme I saw in the last 3 years is like, this meeting could have been an email. It's like our favorite, our favorite saying. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic, but I wanted to just ask you how you became passionate about this particular topic, where the expertise comes from, your experience, and why you're passionate about it.
Yeah. So meetings aren't usually the thing that most people are passionate about. So fair question. So it started a long time ago. Just out of college, I had the opportunity to work in my family business, and I went to a lot of meetings, and they were great. They were well run. They had agendas. We got stuff done. It felt good to be in them. I then left and went to work at another organization, and I was shocked by how terrible their meetings were. And it had never occurred to me that so many organizations were struggling with their meetings. But then once I started talking to folks about the meetings that they had, inevitably I would hear, oh my gosh, I was in the worst meeting today. It was such a waste of time. It was so terrible. And I realized that this was not just unique to this one organization that I happened to work in, but this was like an epidemic. This was a problem at a massive scale. And the solutions were not that hard. I had lived them in my experience inside my family business. And I was like, I think I can do something about this. Like, meetings shouldn't be terrible. Meetings should be one of the best parts of your day where you get to come together with your colleagues and do the great thinking and be in relationship. Like, this is so awesome. And I wanted everyone else to feel that way too when they go to their meetings. So that's what sent me down this path.
So turning meetings from an obligation to an opportunity, I would call it.
Exactly. Said beautifully.
I love it. So let's talk about where meetings go wrong, because this is so relatable. In terms of like, what are the mistakes we're making with meetings that are just like, I feel like there's so many small things that can make a big difference in how well meetings are being run, whether they accomplish what they need to. whether that be tips on how to successfully implement meetings in your business or in your corporate life, or mistakes we're making. I would love some tips on what you see.
Well, there are so many things we do wrong when it comes to meetings. And I want to say part of that is because no one taught us how to have meetings, right? So first, like take the pressure off yourself if you're one of those people that has been to a bad meeting or goes to bad meetings or plans bad meetings or doesn't plan meetings at all. It's okay. Most of us have just never had the opportunity to really learn what it takes to create these things that we do all the time. So let me start first from conceptually, one of the things that we get wrong, which is that we think of meetings as an event. It's on my calendar, it has a start time and an end time, and I show up and that's the meeting. And while that's kind of true, meetings are really more about a cycle. There's a phase of preparation, there's the time you spend in the meeting, and then there's the time you spend afterwards on the follow through and follow up. And that usually then leads into the next stage where you're going to go back into planning and then have the meeting and then manage the follow up. And so when we start to think about meetings as having these phases and being part of a cycle, we can start to identify what are we doing wrong in each of those phases that maybe are compounding into making the meetings themselves really not so great, not so productive. So on the first part in that preparation phase, a lot of us just aren't planning. We're not even doing the work it takes. We're maybe thinking about it in our heads, but we're not taking it the next step to actually put it on paper or put it onto a digital document, right? And that is really important because even if all you do differently going forward is write down what you're thinking about for the meeting and share it with your colleagues who are going to come, you've already taken a huge step in helping other people come into the meeting more prepared so that they can contribute their best thinking. So that's the first thing is just do something to prepare that's more than just thinking about the meeting and showing up. If you really want to get into it, we can talk about the desired outcome, but I want to save that because that could take us on a whole other path in a minute here.
Absolutely. I think let's start with how to set ourselves up for and prepare for successful meetings, how to execute them well, and then let's talk about the desired outcome and how to ensure that we do get what we need out of it. So let's kind of go through maybe almost in a timeline of pre-meeting, during, and then after.
Awesome. All right. So before the meeting, the first thing you want to do is figure out what is it you're trying to accomplish. And we call this the desired outcome. So it's not what you're going to do. It's not we're going to have a discussion and we're going to review this document and we're going to, think about X, Y, or Z, or we're going to brainstorm this thing. It's what is the result of that activity? What are we going to get out of this meeting? How is this work? How is this meeting going to move our work forward? And when you know what the desired outcome is, then you can decide, is a meeting the best way to get to that outcome? So you got to know at the end of this meeting, we want to have a list of ideas for further exploration. We want to have a recommendation to give to this client about how to do their work. We want to have a finished version of this proposal. Whatever it is, you got to know specifically and think about the noun, not the verb. If you're starting your process, you're starting to write down what you're going to do in this meeting, and you're saying, we're going to activity, you're thinking about it in the wrong way. You want to think about the noun, the outcome, the deliverable of that meeting. Once you know that, then you can decide again, is a meeting the right way to get to that outcome? Maybe a digital document where we're co-authoring, collaborating online is a better way to get enrichment on that document instead of sitting together and looking at it slide by slide. Or maybe recording a video of yourself talking about something, sending it to your colleagues, and in giving them that information is a better way than you sitting with them in a meeting and just talking at people for 30 minutes. So you can start to figure out, should this be a meeting?
I love that.
Once you got
Absolutely
that,
love that.
yeah, then we can get into all the other things. But those are really the most important pieces. Those are the two things that are really going to start to make your meetings better.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm just kind of extracting from that, Mamie, which is one is, minimizing how many decisions have to be made in the room versus how much can we collaborate beforehand and narrow down the focus of the meeting into what we actually have to execute together in the room. And then the other part is, I was thinking of this as you were mentioning kind of that asynchronous communication of the collaboration tool was not everybody speaks up in meetings. A lot of personalities feel very intimidated or they kind of take a seat back and they kind of they don't participate actively, but maybe they have some great ideas, but the meeting is not the place where they are going to share those ideas, or they don't feel
Mm.
welcome to share them. And that's not necessarily, can be cultural. It can be in terms of your company culture and like how they really feel about it. But a lot of personalities just kind of sit back, think, analyze, and they don't really spit out everything that's in their head in real time. So a lot of that is really helpful for people who operate differently, right? So that they can actually contribute in different ways.
Completely. There are so many different ways that we can engage with material. And for some of us, as you said, it's about processing time. We need to really think, we need to sleep on it, and then we can come in and share our best ideas. For other folks, it's just their personality to be a little more quiet and reserved in a meeting. And they're just never going to jump in unless there's an opportunity that's really served up to them in a way that works. And sometimes it's just the pure mathematics, right? You got 60 minutes in a meeting. Assume the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes are reserved for entering and exiting. And then you only have 50 minutes left. If you have 5 people there, you get 10 minutes of each person's thinking. That's it. You took an hour of their time to get 10 minutes of their thinking. And that's if we're sharing the microphone equitably, right? Which we don't usually do for lots
Right.
of different reasons. So using collaboration tools before or during the meeting can create a more inclusive kind of experience. And you get better thinking and more thinking from each person because you're giving them different ways to access their brain. You're giving them different ways to communicate. So it totally changes the experience of the meeting. And by the way, it also makes it a lot more fun if you're in a meeting and you get to like type stuff in and move things around on a screen. Like that itself is also more engaging, which will get people's energy up in a new way.
Yeah, because you go from passive listening to active participation, and you kind of can't hide behind not participating if everyone's kind of sketching together.
Exactly.
I love that. So really quick on the subject of kind of the desired outcome, right? Let's talk about the agenda. Do we
Mhm.
send it? When we send it, what is a good agenda? Because I feel like a lot of meeting agendas default to the meeting host's dump of bullet points of what they want to accomplish or what questions there are. What is the best way? I love how you phrased it with a noun instead of activity, right? Of what we want for a desired outcome. But can we unpack the desired outcome and how we communicate that?
Yes. So I would say at the very least, just give people the desired outcome. Even if you haven't written out a whole agenda breaking down this 10 minutes will be on this topic and this 10 minutes will be on that topic, and then we're going to do this activity on a Jamboard. If all you do is send people the desired outcome, that at the very least will help them know what the meeting's about and come in ready to share, or identify if this meeting is not a good use of their time. They may not be the right person to contribute. There may be another colleague, or they may have some competing interests and competing priorities, and they can now go to you and say, "Hey, boss, I have to do this other thing. What would you rather have me do? Focus on this meeting with this outcome, or I can go do this other work." But if you don't tell them what the meeting's really about, it's hard for them to know how to show up and if it's a good use of their time.
I agree. And I used to be in that position too. Yeah, as a director, I would be triple booked. And I'd say, which of these things has a priority? And none of them would have an agenda or an objective. And so it would be super hard to figure out which one was going to be take a priority. And that is so, so, so powerful in actually owning the priorities and being able to manage the time wisely.
Exactly. Now, if you want to go to the next step and lay out your agenda, so awesome for you. I really commend that because it will make your meeting even that much more effective and productive. So there are kind of 3 different pieces to a meeting. The first is that 5-minute coming into the room. And this is where you want to say out loud, this is what our desired outcome for this meeting is. And by doing that, you are helping everyone who showed up to offload and kind of forget all the other things that they were just doing, because of course we've come from another meeting, another project, something else we were doing. So we need to help refocus people. Why are you here? What are we trying to accomplish together? And give everyone an opportunity to say what else is on their mind. Do a check-in, people a chance to say hello and build some relationships. This is the time where someone can say, I'm waiting for a phone call from the doctor, so if I have to step away for a minute, you know why. Or I'm feeling really stressed right now because I have this other big project that is kind of weighing on me. And so I apologize if I don't show up as my normal energetic self. Whatever it might be, get people talking. And there's actually research that shows when people talk early in the meeting, they are more likely to talk later on in the meeting. So going back to your point about getting people to contribute, you want everyone there to speak within the first 5 minutes so they feel like they are part of the meeting and their voice is valued.
I love
Yeah.
that idea. And going back to like the desired outcome and communicating it, right? I want to alleviate some pressure from listeners who are thinking, I have to have complete clarity on the exact thing I want to accomplish from the meeting with extreme specificity and hone it in clarity. And sometimes the meeting is just to vet ideas or just to get it off your chest of something going on or share an update or like the desired outcome doesn't have to be something so tangible and literal, but it can just be my goal is to inform you about something, or the goal is to, have a discussion around and get candid thoughts about this idea we have, right? It can be, I don't know, it doesn't have to be so much pressure filled to identify that desired outcome. It could just be something as the objective is to get closer to something or to make progress in a certain area, right?
Sort of. so
Okay.
So I would say on the information sharing side, that's the one reason we say you shouldn't have a meeting. If
Okay.
your whole goal is to share information, it is best done in other forms using video messages, a written memo, a slide deck that you record like yourself talking through and people can watch the presentation, except when it is something that is highly sensitive. And so you want to show the person the respect of giving them this information face to face, or the information is really complex and you want to sit down and make sure that you're checking for understanding as you're communicating. If you're giving an update, don't do it in a meeting. No one wants to sit through more updates and more check-ins. Like that's not what we need in our lives.
I love the all hands that is one
Yeah.
person talking.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need that. So
Yeah.
if this is why is a meeting the right modality to get to the desired outcome. If you're talking just about sharing information, consider other ways of doing so. And you can even share a video and then have a 5-minute follow up with someone to say, hey, did you have any questions about that? Right? If you want to make sure they watched it, because you're like, oh, I know. If I send someone an email saying, please watch this 10-minute video where I explain the blah, 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 right? And you're like, no one's going to watch that. They're going to put it at the bottom of their to do list. This is a complaint I get a lot or a concern I get a lot from clients. I say, yeah, that's great. Tell them, schedule a 5-minute follow up with each person and say, all right, here, please watch this video. And then we'll hop on the phone for 5 minutes and then you can ask any questions. We can make sure you got clarity. And once they have that accountability embedded there, you're gotten much better chances they're going to do it. And from that mathematical perspective, if you have 10 people who are doing that, or even just say 5 people who are doing that, it's going to take you about half an hour, right? 5 times 5, 25 minutes for you to do that little check-in with each person, but you've only taken 5 minutes from each person. So you've saved each of them 25 minutes. And that 25 minutes or 20 minutes adds up.
Yep.
So the other part, though, to your question around how much clarity do you really need for the desired outcome, here's where I'd say the more specificity, the more likely you're going to get to the outcome. And the more likely your team members will understand what it is that you're going for and what they need to do. That doesn't mean you have to have perfect specificity. And it doesn't mean that it has to be your outcome. You can start a meeting. If you have a weekly team meeting and you know that this is the place where we come together to solve problems that have bubbled up in the past couple of days, and we want the whole group's thinking, great, that's your desired outcome. Solve problems that have bubbled up, right? And so you want everyone to walk away feeling like their problem has been solved. You don't need to know what those problems are. The team can bring those problems in. You can build the agenda. You can get more specific at the start of the meeting with your team contributing. But if you go into a team meeting every week and you say, what are we talking about? Anybody have anything they want to share? Right now, the meeting can go in a bajillion different directions, and it's not actually useful for most folks.
I love that. So the perfect example, this is what I was going for, is as opposed to listing all the problems we have to solve, it could just be, like basically saying we want to address the problems that have been addressed over the past week or something that have been sent to us. So it could just be, I say vague, but it is specific that we want to solve these problems, but we don't have to list the problem and the perceived solution for everything. We must solve A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You could just say something like, we're solving the key priority problems for our top clients this week or something like that. That would be a desired outcome that would work.
Exactly. And I do this with
Okay.
my team. I have a team that I work with every week, and our agendas are built on the spot. So everyone
Mhm.
knows that this is the time where you get everybody's brain share. And so this meeting, the whole purpose of this meeting is to bring issues in that you want everyone on the team to weigh in on. And then at the start of the meeting, we make a list of all the topics. So that's part of our check-in is the round robin where each person shares, this is the thing I want to bring into the room today. We prioritize them so that we make sure if we run out of time that we've at least gotten to the things that are the juiciest or meatiest or most urgent. And then we just work through them one at a time.
Perfect. Now, let's talk about the recurring standing meetings versus the spotlight, on the
Mhm.
fly meetings. When does it make sense, I guess, because I feel like I'm going to just be blunt and say it's a lazy alternative to probably just set up a recurring meeting, knowing that you're probably going to have to set up a meeting and just saying, I'm just going to make it a recurring thing so I don't have to keep worrying about this and having to always set up a meeting when I know we need one. So
Yeah.
the recurring meetings end up being white noise in a sense in some cases because it's there, you're going to talk about it, go through the same agenda, but I feel like it gets to be a lower engagement over time because it just becomes so routine. What are your
hmm
thoughts on the having like a set recurring standing meeting for certain things versus let's just spot book them when we know we need them?
So some of it depends on just the logistics of your calendar. So I have a lot of clients whose calendars are so booked that you can't really have impromptu meetings. If I'm like, it's Monday, we need a meeting, they're like, I can see you next Thursday, right? Like
Right.
that's just how it works. So to some extent, recurring meetings are good as a land grab because you know now if there's something you need to talk about, the time is available, it's being held. But the key word there is if. If we have something to talk about, the time is available. So, what I recommend for most teams is there are very few truly recurring meetings you need to have, right? A monthly one-on-one with your team members, yes, that needs to be a recurring meeting. You should have it every single month or every 6 weeks, however you want to pace it, or even for some teams every other week. But most of the project meetings that we have or the kind of ongoing team meetings that we have don't need to be held on a regular frequency. You can use that time to say, all right, we have an hour this week. What do we need to accomplish that needs to happen in a meeting? And if we have an agenda that we need to build, if we have a desired outcome we need to accomplish, then great, use the time. And if you don't, let it go. You don't need to have the meeting just because it's on the calendar.
Totally agree. And I love this one, duration of meetings. I feel like we tend to kind of follow this Parkinson's law of we fill the space we are given
Yeah.
and that we tend to take 60 or more minutes in a 60-minute meeting all the time. And especially, I want to talk about that, but also how it relates to how meetings have changed in the last few years with so much virtual focus and back to back to back to back constantly sitting
Yeah.
on Zoom with barely any bio breaks. So let's just
Yeah.
talk about scheduling your meetings and setting the right duration so that you can be successful.
Yeah. All right. So, first of all, meetings should take as long as they need to accomplish the desired outcome. Part of the problem that we have is we don't know when we're done because we don't know what we're trying to accomplish. So, if you know what the desired outcome is, and if you've even gone that next step to say, what do we need to do in this meeting to get us to the desired outcome, right? Then you can actually say, it's only going to take us 42 minutes based on my calculation. So, let's schedule a 45-minute meeting. And then let's follow our plan to get us there. That doesn't mean it's always going to work. Sometimes conversations go in different directions, new information is brought into the room, and a conversation needs to expand. But if you're not even sure what you're trying to accomplish, you could easily take up an hour or more having a nice discussion and still not get to something valuable, right? So, on the duration side, this is where if you want to get clearer, plan the agenda, figure out, all right, here's the question. We're going to talk about it for 10 minutes. And then I want to do an activity where everybody goes onto the mind map and puts in their ideas. And I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes to think and then 5 minutes to type. So that'll be another 7 minutes, right? If you build it out, then you know how much time a conversation is going to take, how much time a meeting needs to get through it all. In terms of the back to back to back world that we're living in, this is the tricky one, right? Ideally, meetings would not be back to back. It's really hard to get people to plan 55-minute meetings or 20-minute meetings, right? We kind of live by the rules of Outlook and Google Calendar that auto populate for these
Yep.
half-hour chunks, right? And even when we do schedule 55-minute meetings, half the time we just keep on going right up to the end anyways. And so there's no time for restroom breaks. So this is why I say assume the first 5 minutes are just going to be getting in the room. You got to give people time to leave their whatever they were doing before, get a glass of water, use the restroom, get onto the right link, deal with any tech issues. It's just part of the world. You could try to block your calendar to not have back-to-back meetings and leave yourself, 15 minutes or half an hour between, but that's actually not helpful either because that creates a different problem. That creates the problem of lack of deep work time. We actually need significant periods of time, meaning an hour plus, to be able to get into a project. If your whole day is spotted with meetings, you never feel like you get anything else done because even though you had 3 hours of free time, it was broken up into chunks that didn't give you an opportunity to do more than maybe check email or make a phone call or read a document. So in some ways, it's better to have all of your meetings kind of back to back to back and then have a chunk of time where you can focus on other work and just manage yourself, manage your energy, and know what works for you. If you know that you cannot sit through 3 hours of meetings straight, try to put in those 15-minute breaks between them. Or just let your folks know. I do this all the time. I hop onto the Zoom. I say, hey, folks, I need a quick break. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Turn my camera and mic off, walk away, grab some water, try to refresh myself and come back in. And again, if you've planned for that first 5 minutes to be that entry, it doesn't bother the meeting. It doesn't throw the whole meeting off. And it even gives everyone else permission to get up and stretch for a second while you're, doing your thing.
Totally agree. It's like you've studied my Outlook calendar by saying all that and going,
Right.
yep, this is all true. And here's one thing that we just recently implemented that should have not taken me this long to figure out, which is exactly what you just said. So during tax season, because I did taxes this past year as a CPA, and I realized that I was putting this availability on my calendar through Calendly, which is a wonderful tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it will block these meetings all over the place for half-hour tax return reviews. And then I realized they are so scattered, these little half-hour meetings with clients, where I'm meeting with so many of them that I had to open up availability, but I was getting none of the returns physically done because I had a meeting every hour and a half or so, and I would get interrupted by having to do a meeting every time I had some momentum with the deep work. So you're 100% right on that. And I said, you know what? We're going to slice it, and I'm going to do either only afternoons or only certain days. And I'm going to give myself an entire block of time that is
Yes.
dedicated to just the deep work where I am uninterrupted. That was one of the biggest game changers I think I've had in my productivity in years.
It's huge. It's huge. It's why companies talk about no meeting days because they're like, we aren't getting anything done. We're in too many meetings. And I'm like, yeah, no meeting days are not about better meetings. No meeting days are about deep focused work. So exactly what you're saying, blocking half of a day to just do focus work, having meetings only on certain days so that other days are reserved for focus work. That's something that you can decide what works best for you and you can talk with your team about. I know for myself, I like having one day a week that has no meetings where I can just dive in and just really focus on all my work. But if I had 3 days like that, I would go nuts. I love talking to people. I love being in meetings that are energizing. That's what gives me, fills me up. So I don't want to have more than one day without meetings on it. For other
Yeah.
folks, they're like, give me 3 days with no meetings. That's what I really need. So talking with your team about what works for them can help you design the right structure for your company.
I agree. And the way we work too, I think that we found is so, for example, my schedule is Monday is admin and internal team meeting. So we're talking
Hmm.
among the team and we're trying to make things better. We're kind of coming into the week fresh with no client meetings and no rush to get work done over the weekend for a client
Right.
meeting on Monday. So that we're setting the tone of we're working together and we're setting objectives for the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is all client stuff. Friday is for networking, marketing, the more fun meetings, the more friendly and less, again, we're not creating work because I think a lot of meetings, as opposed to accomplishing work, also create a lot of work.
Yes.
So I say no work creation on Monday and Friday, meaning we're not meeting with clients that will then generate more work for us to do and more assignments. when doing that intentionally, again, game changer, because now I don't feel pressure to work over the weekend because I have deep work time on Monday and Friday to be able to field all that stuff. So I never feel that pressure.
I love that, right? And that's the rhythm that works well for you and your team. That's
Exactly.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
There's one other kind of meeting that I think teams tend to get wrong, which is the kind of Monday morning team meeting. Let's all get
Yeah.
together. I'm super curious to know if you have a Monday morning team meeting.
We don't. I don't do any meetings before 11 a.m. But
Yes.
that's also because for two reasons. One, I want to go to the gym and I hate feeling rushed in the morning. And that was actually one of the reasons I left my job and started my business. I said, I'm not doing any more 8 a.m., 9 a.m. Monday meeting. No, no. We're giving everyone Monday morning to get in the zone, get what they need done, catch up, just kind of ease into the week. But also, I have a lot of team members, coincidentally, that are in earlier time zones. I'm typically based in the East Coast. So I have a lot of people. I have someone who's in Alaska
Mhm.
who's 4 hours before me. I can't do that. So all of our stuff is actually intentionally in the afternoon because, at least for me, I work best on deep work in the morning, focused work, planning, intention setting, and kind of get easing in. I'm not ready to actually probably talk to another human before noon anyway. So it works out well, but we do these like spot individual meetings or team meetings Monday afternoons.
Yeah, I love that. Monday afternoons is great because, as you said, Monday morning, we're easing in, but it's also for many folks the time that, like, the most fresh time you are going to have all week because you've just come off the weekend. So you don't want to start with putting us into a meeting and having the best energy be in the meeting. You want people to put their best energy into the work that they have to get done. So I always coach teams to either meet later in the day on Monday, if you like having Monday as your meeting day because it's the start of the week, or if you can shift it to a Friday meeting, it can be a lot of fun, both because you're kind of wrapping up the week and you get to celebrate some accomplishments as part of your weekly gathering and talk about and plan for the next week. So people are set up and ready to go so that they know Monday morning what those priorities are for the week and they can dive right in. And you can also use it as a chance to kind of talk about the weekend, what's coming up, and kind of end your Friday with some really nice closure as people kind of say goodbye to the week behind them and look forward to the week ahead.
I totally agree. Now, let's talk about the nuances of virtual meetings and if how much of the advice you've shared so far, Mamie, is, I know this is pretty much universally applicable, but how can we specifically apply this to virtual meetings? What is unique about virtual meetings and how can we adapt it really well?
Yeah. So virtual meetings are clearly here to stay. Hybrid meetings are the thing that a lot of teams are really struggling with, even more than just virtual meetings. And some folks are having in person meetings, but a lot of my clients are still in this world where virtual is ruling us. So the beauty about virtual meetings is that to me, they actually can be more inclusive, more equitable, easier for us to engage in person meetings. And this is why. When you're sitting at a table, there's an instant hierarchy. Where is the boss sitting? Most of the time at the head of the table. I actually went to a meeting where I tried not to sit at the head of the table and someone corrected me and made me move seats and said, no, you need to sit here so that everyone can see you better. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I specifically didn't want to sit at the head of the table. So when we're meeting virtually, right, we're all kind of equal sized squares on the screen. And we have all of these tools available for us to use easily to create new and different ways of engaging, right? We can do online polls, we can have mind maps, we can have Jamboards, whiteboards, all this kinds of stuff that everyone can be contributing to, which when we're in an in-person meeting, it's just not the same. It's not the same to say, okay, everybody get out your phone and like go to this website and answer this poll. And all right, now I'm going to draw on the whiteboard. Who else wants to come draw on the whiteboard with me? It's a different experience in person, and we can take advantage of Zoom or virtual meetings to use these tools that, again, create more fun, more engagement, and better thinking and access and tapping into more equitable, inclusive practices. I know there was a second part of your question and I just forgot what it was.
No, adapting the virtual, right? Making it feel more inclusive. And it's so interesting because I feel like this is like the not quote unquote unpopular opinion, but it definitely goes against the nature of us to think that virtual meetings are less engaging, that people can, it's one thing too, because people can turn their camera off. People
Mhm.
can, be passively listening. There's all of these funny
Yeah.
social media clips of somebody in their pajamas drinking wine and they're like, whatever. It's like, hey, Susan, can you turn on your camera? And she's like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, I don't want to show what I look like. I think though that
Yeah.
there's the benefit and the curse, right? There's the benefit though of the accessibility of not feeling like you have to. There's no barrier really. Like you can attend the meeting, use your brain, not worry about what you look like, not worrying about your presentation, just kind of absorbing
Yeah.
it, contributing authentically, and just being there and being present. But I think being present is also a challenge in virtual as well when you have a lot going on and you're not in the environment that fosters it. So I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit of the meeting organization is key, but there's also a tone that you have to set when you're an attendee of the meeting to make sure you're positioned for success to participate.
Completely, right? And I think we've gotten a lot better through the pandemic of showing up prepared, having our cameras on, right? Participating in those ways that maybe in the beginning we were kind of a little more lax on. And now we've kind of figured out that no, this is actually a real business practice and we need to not just wear our pajamas and not be, doing other things on the side.
Yeah, not
But
dressed from here up.
right. But in terms of engagement, right, people were multitasking in in-person meetings before, right? Multitasking during a meeting is not unique to virtual meetings. It's happening in all kinds of meetings. And most of the time when that's happening, it's for one of two reasons. Either the person really has other things going on that are a higher priority, and they haven't figured out how to say no to you as a meeting leader, that I shouldn't be here because I have this other thing that's more important, or how to balance the fact that they have these two things that they really want to do both of, and they just don't know how to actually get them both done. So sometimes it's a matter of capacity, and sometimes it's a matter of lack of engagement, that you as a meeting leader haven't set up the meeting in a way that this person feels engaged, in a way that they feel like they have something valuable to add, in a way that they feel like they want to be attentive to the content, to the questions you're asking or the conversation you're having. And that is something that we can do as meeting leaders to make sure that we're inviting the right people to the meeting so that we're not having people who really shouldn't be there sit there and be bored. Because if you're sitting there bored, right, your course can be multitasking. So make sure you have the right people in the meeting and make sure that there is a norm and an agreement amongst the team that if this is not engaging, come and talk to me. Like, help me make my meetings better. It's not just on me as the meeting leader. Like, if I'm not designing a good agenda or I haven't used some of these tools that maybe you think we should be using, like, help me improve our meetings. And one of my favorite tips for managers is to say, have a meeting about your meetings. Get your team together and say, hey guys, we go to a lot of meetings together. What's working? What do we like about the way that we meet? What's not working? How might we do meetings better? What kind of tools would be interesting for us to try using? Are there different ways that we could not have meetings, but use other tools instead, other ways of communication instead? And let the group help figure out what the right meetings are, what the right methods are, what the right tools are, all of those things. It doesn't just have to be on you as a meeting leader.
And on that note, too, I was going to ask what tools you've seen be successful, what you've seen work well, maybe some tactical examples of how people converted a lot of unnecessary meetings into a sort of asynchronous communication channel or collaboration.
Yeah. So there's a million tools, right? You go online, you Google search them, digital tools for meetings, and there's just so many, right? So Mentimeter and Google Jamboards, and now Zoom has a whole bunch of plugins with Miro and Mural, and like they're limitless. And Microsoft Teams has a bunch that is embedded. So you really have your pick of what feels right for you in terms of whiteboards or polling or shared documents or mind maps or any of those things. In terms of how it transforms, so I have one team where we literally were just talking last week about how many meetings we need to schedule as follow-up to kind of get the work done. And we decided not to schedule 3 follow-up meetings, but to create different activities for people to do independently and then have one follow-up meeting where we processed all that thinking together. So one of the colleagues set up a Jamboard with different questions on each board and said, everybody please go in and write your reflections on the conversation we just had against each of these different topics. And then we're going to meet in, I don't remember, it's like 2 weeks from now. And the team leader is actually going to do some initial processing of all of that thinking and present back to us. Here's the kind of key takeaways. And then as a group, we can decide how we want to move work forward. So there's lots of ways you can take what comes out of a meeting and turn it into some sort of activity so that you don't have to just have another meeting. And then same thing on the earlier side. You can use Slack. I've seen a couple teams that have really gotten into Slack in this way, where they put polls or pre-work questions into Slack and ask people to either vote with an emoji or with a reaction, or they will ask people to leave comments in the Slack thread. And then the meeting leader will use that as helping them prepare for the meeting so that they've already brought that thinking into the room. So it's really about using the tools that feel most comfortable for your team.
Yeah, and a couple of things that we've implemented too is we started using Slack with clients to handle issues that can be handled through messages that we don't need to do a spot meeting on, because we
Yeah.
have an on-demand booking link with our clients, right? It's not just within the team, but also with your other stakeholders, your clients, external parties too, where they say, can we just get on a call? And we say, actually, we have an entire Slack channel for the CFO team. And this also ensures that you're hitting all of us at the same time with information. So now we're all getting the information and we can all then say, hey, do we need to have a meeting on this, or can we just solve it right here and now by answering the questions that the client has in real time? Not only is that high value by getting quick responses, but it just
Mhm.
saves everyone the time and energy of deferring out the answer, having to find time on the calendars, sync everybody up. It's just so much easier.
Yes, yes, yes. Right. We forget about the logistics that go into meetings, that finding the time, someone has to like do the magic of figuring out the calendars. Even with a Calendly link, it still takes effort to manage the logistics. And oftentimes then there's no documentation. And the beautiful thing about having these kinds of quote meetings via Slack, right, where you can just have the conversation through Slack or through email or in a shared document somewhere, is you now have it documented. And so if you ever need to refer back to it, it's there. So much of what we talk about in meetings gets lost. It's like knowledge scrap because we only write down the few things that we really need to remember going forward. And we don't write down all the other things, which is fine. We don't need to capture verbatim an entire meeting. No one wants to go back and watch a recording or read a transcript. But it is helpful in certain moments to be able to refer back and say, oh, that's why we decided that thing. Or that was the critical information that was shared. And having it in writing can be a great tool.
I totally agree. And the other thing too is, project management, right? Because I feel like project management, when you have a broader project with an overall objective, because there's definitely meetings with their own objective to move something forward. But then there's also these bigger projects that are going to have, standard meetings in between. You're going to have to accomplish certain chunks of these objectives. And I think good project management skills and tools is essential to actually create the efficiency of the meeting as well. But also, we use Asana, which is like our primary
Mhm.
project management tool. And so many things are just handled in Asana. Where, for example, my podcast team who's listening to this, one of my podcast team members, she's communicating with me basically through Asana, and we meet monthly instead of weekly now because everything is handled basically through commenting, assigning tasks, and being able to communicate asynchronously through a tool like that, where it normally would have been sit down, we go through everything that's open, we go through who's going to do what. But in reality, you don't necessarily need a meeting to communicate that. To your earlier point, if it's information sharing or just making a plan, that can also be done through all these tools we have, at our fingertips right now, and we need to start using them.
Absolutely. The one thing that gets lost in that, and it is not a reason to have a meeting per se in this way, but it is something we have to be attentive to as leaders, is the relationship, right? If we've been
Yes.
working with someone for a long time and you have a close relationship and you have lots of opportunities to engage with them, pushing more and more of our work to be asynchronous makes perfect sense. If this one meeting was the one time a week that you got on the phone with someone or got onto a virtual meeting and you looked them in the eye and you had a conversation about their weekend or what's going on with their kids or their dog, and that now goes away because we have all of these great asynchronous tools, you need to do something about that relationship strengthening because we don't want all these tools to be so efficient that we lose the human to human connection. So it's just something to be aware of and make sure that you're creating plenty of opportunities in other ways to build those relationships.
I think that's key too, especially with the virtual aspect of a lot of our relationships. I know that I'll give you an example of this is kind of a funny thing, and I'm sure you've seen this before. I used to work at a big four firm, And I was one of maybe 4 team members that wasn't based in New York, which is where my team was primarily based. I was in like a satellite office, right?
Mhm.
The team would do lunch and learns in the New York office. And you know what they would do? They would invite us via phone
Oh, no.
to the lunch and learn. So you know what we did? We had to listen to everyone go get their pizza. Everyone network with
Oh,
each other. And we were just on that little box in the middle of the conference room table. And we had to go buy our lunch at the caf and sit together in a conference room and just listen to everybody else have fun in the room. And then they would start 15 minutes later with the actual training that was a little muffled because nobody was near the actual speaker. And you know exactly, like you can almost see this happening, right? And
that's
I would
so
think, oh, like we
sad.
felt so unvalued and like second class citizens because of that. You have to be aware of the tone you're setting and the relationships and what it's doing for especially virtual employees because they already feel disconnected. So you
Mm,
have to go above and beyond to create that connection if they're not going to be physically present and do a little bit more of that. Would you agree?
absolutely. And there are so many different ways to do that. I have one client who his team wanted to do a post work get together with like going to a bar or something like that. And he was like, I don't know, like I feel weird asking people to like take time after work. And I was like, so why don't you turn it into a breakfast? Come at 9 a.m. Let's have breakfast together and then go into the workday at 10. And he was like, but we can't take work time for this. But it was like this like visceral reaction that this needed to be a like, if we're going to do a breakfast, it has to be at 8 a.m. or it has to be after work at like 6 p.m. And I was like, no, no, no. This is an essential part of building your team and relationships and dynamic. It's a work activity. It can be during work hours. So it doesn't just have to be a thing we do outside of work to like build relationships and team building. It can be something you do during the workday, but how you position it and how you make sure people feel included is so important, especially as you're saying with virtual teams. And there are lovely ways to bring people together. I'll give you one other story. I had another client who was having meetings every single week, and they were just awful. Like everyone hated them. And the team leader was like, I don't know what to do about this. Like, this is the one time a week we all get together, and I really want everyone to feel like good about being here together as this team. And what they realized is that each person was managing their own portfolio and they didn't really have a lot of value to contribute to each other's work. So getting together to talk about what they were doing didn't help anyone. It didn't make their work better. So they shifted to what they called family reunion. And once a month, they would gather together for about an hour. They were doing it at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would have pizza and beer and wine and whatever. And they would just talk. It was literally just like, let's hang out, because that was what they needed. They didn't need to meet every single week to talk about their work, to build relationships. They actually just needed time to talk. And so as a virtual team, you can do that. You can have a once a month, let's hop on Zoom. Everybody bring something to drink, coffee, water, tea, whatever. And sometimes there can be like a fun prompt, because what we can't do on a Zoom meeting when there's 4 or 5 or 6 of us is have multiple side conversation, right? That's super awkward. And you don't want it to be so facilitated. We're going to go into breakout rooms now and you're going to have a chance to check in with each colleague. Feels a little weird. But if you give people a fun game or a prompt or something to do together, you can have very similar, beautiful relationship time virtually.
I agree. And I think that it's easier to do something like that in terms of scheduling it and coordinating when they don't all have to be physically in the same room and
Mhm.
you can actually do it at different hours of the day. I think that's so important too to do it during the traditional business hours because like making people feel like they're taking some of their own free time, it just creates another barrier for them to being committed and engaged in it as well.
Yes, exactly. And when you have people across different time zones, right? Now you might be getting into somebody's bedtime with their kids, and that's not fair to anyone. So, doing it during those work hours and really seeing this as part of your responsibility and your work is important, because that's what it is. It's not extra, it's actually part of our jobs.
And it's so important, guys, when you're listening to this to understand that the impact of better meetings is better morale, better retention, longer term employees, and just overall happiness in the company. I truly believe that when you have really good employees that are passionate and they care and they're happy where they work, you have happy customers because you're going to have everyone committed to the same mission, the same goal. this is all contributing to a better work environment. And I really do think that meetings at their core are one of the reasons people will also be demotivated and will also get frustrated, as I think this can actually make or break a company morale and culture.
Completely. My favorite thing is meetings are a microcosm of your organization. They are a reflection of everything else. They are a reflection of how you value people's time, how you respect their voice, how you get your work done. Do you plan it well? Do you treat your time together as something that is precious? Right? All of the things that we want our team members to do or feel in our organization writ large happen in a meeting. Power dynamics, right? Who gets to speak up and who doesn't? Who feels engaged and who doesn't? How are we using our time together? All of those things. So when you improve your meetings, it naturally flows out to start to build morale, build energy, build relationships, and foster all kinds of good things in all other parts of your organization.
Absolutely love it. Mamie, how can folks learn more from you, hear more about education on better meetings, and maybe get some help implementing some of these things?
So the best place to go is themodernmanager.com. I have a podcast where I talk about meetings and many, many other things. There's tons of resources there. And if you really specifically want meeting support, Meteor.com, Meteor.com is my meetings focused business. And there's tons of stuff there specific to meetings.
All right, guys, we'll make sure that's all in the show notes. I know there were so many different things that you can implement that you took away from today's episode. If you did learn something new or have an idea based on what Mamie was talking about, make sure you're posting it on Instagram and tagging at Keep What You Earn to let us know what you're learning and what you're taking away. Mamie, thank you so much for jumping on the show with me today. If you find yourself surprised by how much you make and how little you actually keep, then your problem probably isn't your profit. It's your cash flow. Cash flow problems are the number one reason small businesses fail because they run out of gas in the tank. And that's why I released a mini course called Endless Cash that helps you quickly forecast your own cash flow using the same template that we use with our clients. If the pressure of launches and big investments stress you out, then grab a copy of Endless Cash and start getting ahead of those road bumps right now. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.